Welcome to another day on Planet Doug. Today is a travel day, and I'm riding my scooter from the town of Gampheng Phet back to Mae Sot. And I thought that today I would make this a little bit of a Google Maps experience. Okay, here is Google Maps, of course, and down here where you see the blue dot, that's where I am right now in Gampheng Phet. And where I want to go is over here. There's Mae Sot over here. And as you can see, there's a major highway connecting Mae Sot with Tak, and then that's another highway going from Tak down to Gampheng Phet. And if you were in a hurry and you were driving a car or a fast motorcycle, that's the route that you would follow. And of course, if you ask Google Maps for directions, that's where they're going to tell you to go. So let's do that just for fun. Click on Mae Sot. So here's the lovely town of Mae Sot, and I ask Google Maps for directions, and there we get it. So it's recommending, I have it set to a motorcycle going down Highway 1 to Tak, and then Highway 12 to Mae Sot, and it says that would take 2 hours and 36 minutes, and it's 145 kilometers. However, I would like to go down some side roads, of course, some smaller roads. My little scooter is not entirely happy on these busy highways, nor am I most of the time. Though for this part, Highway 12, there is no alternative. There is only this road, and there are no small roads running parallel to it. So for most of the distance between Tak City and Mae Sot, you have no choice but to ride on this highway unless you want to go further to the north. So if you go north of Tak, up here to the base, this is where the dam is located. This is where Sam Niao is. And there is a road going from Sam Niao over the mountains, beautiful mountain road, down to Mae Ramat here, and then you can come down to Mae Sot. So that is an alternative if you want to go on small roads the whole way. But I don't really have the time to do that today. So I am going to try and go a more direct route, but I am looking for a smaller road to get me from Gampheng Phet up to Highway 12. And I did a bit of research yesterday, and this is what I wanted to show you in this little screen capture before we get started on the ride today. So Google Maps, I find, is really quite interesting because it has so many levels to it. It has different maps, of course. This is the default map. And then if you click on this circle here, of course, you can choose the satellite map or the terrain map, or you can add or remove all of these sorts of details down below. So I generally switch back and forth between default and satellite. Terrain, I look at sometimes, but not that often. But most of my planning begins in the default mode, of course, because it's easier to see the roads. So that's one level to Google Maps, map types as they call them, but you can also zoom in and out, and as you zoom in, you see more detail. So right here, for example, if I zoom in a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about this section here first between Tak and Gampheng Phet, because I did this route before. So I knew I could follow the main highway, this big yellow line, and that would get me there very quickly. But when I looked at Google Maps, I saw this white line right here. And I thought, that looks much nicer. Let's follow that road down to Gampheng Phet. That would be a much more pleasant ride. Following the shore, it looks like it follows the shore of the Ping River. But you're not done yet. So here's the road where my mouse cursor is pointing. But if we zoom in more and more, look at that. Suddenly more roads have appeared. There's 104 that I was considering taking, seemed like the most scenic route, but now I've got this road right beside the river. because we've zoomed in, and at this scale, you see many more roads. And this, in fact, is the road that I took from Tak down to Gamphaeng Phet. So as we zoom out, you'll see that that small road will suddenly disappear. Boom, it's gone. So it looks like we only have a choice between this road and that one. But what I want to do, of course, is go to Mae Sot. So I'm looking towards this side, and the first thing I saw were these roads. And it's a little bit unsatisfying because if we go back out more, let's get down to Gamphaeng Phet. Okay, so here's where I am. You can just see the blue dot. And you can see that instead of taking the main highway, instead of returning along the Ping River, I could follow this road, get to this intersection, and then start moving towards the north. But then I have to come all the way back to the main highway again, and then I can get back on this small road and then eventually link up with Highway 12 at this point, and then I have to stay on the main highway all the way to Mae Sot. But at least I can start the day through countryside instead of going on the main highway. So that's what I was thinking about doing. But of course, I wanted to zoom in and see if there were any alternatives. So if we start zooming in, suddenly all of these small roads start to show up. And I start wondering, well, maybe I can incorporate some of these small roads into this journey. So I started looking at those, and then as I went up to the main highway, and I'm moving along the main highway, there's still nothing much of, this seems to be the only alternative, 1108, but not quite sure I have this lined up right, but if you zoom in further, there's the Hill Tribes Market there. Move over this way, and suddenly you see this cluster of roads, which usually means there's a village or a town there, and I see that there's a small road heading south out of there. And I thought, I wonder whether these roads can eventually, if you trace them, go all the way down to Gamphaeng Phet. It's a bit hard to figure out because look how much you have to zoom in even to see those roads. As soon as I zoom out to try and get a sense of perspective, they're gone. I can't see them at all anymore. So you got to zoom in quite far for these roads to appear. And then it takes a long time to scroll around on the map to sort of see where they go. So that's what I was trying to figure out. What are my choices? Do I have to follow this road to get to this point? Or could I follow this small pattern of roads leading up to around here? I'll jump to the end here and tell you that after a lot of research and using two particular techniques, I discovered that it might actually be possible to get all the way to Highway 12 to this community that I saw up here through those very small roads. So I could take that route in theory, or I can take this route. So I was trying to decide whether I should attempt these small roads or stick to this one that is visible on Google Maps. And to figure that out, I can do two different things. One thing I can do, of course, is go down to Street View. So what I tend to do is I'll go down to where I can see the road, and then if you click somewhere, drop a pin, down here, a little picture will show up in the bottom left corner. And that will give you the street view of that point. So I can click on that and I can see the road condition. And of course I can zoom around and move up and down the road, look around and sort of judge, okay, that road, yeah, that's in very good condition. So that is, and it looks like a beautiful road. So I would have no trouble taking that on my scooter. So that is one technique that I use. So I figured out that, yes, this road is perfectly navigable for someone like me. But what about this other road that I was considering? First, we have to find it. Got to zoom in. See what I mean about these small roads? They're challenging. And okay, here we are. So here's the starting or the ending point where I could eventually join up with Highway 12 again. And I traced this all the way back to Gamfeng Fet, and I did learn that in theory it is possible. But let's move down a certain distance, get to this point, for example, and then I'll drop a pin here. So I've got a pin and no photograph shows up. So that tells me that the Google Maps truck, the camera truck, never went on this road. And that kind of makes sense. A road like this is probably way too unimportant and probably way too rough for the Google camera vehicles to follow. So I cannot actually get a street view here. And that gives me some information. But of course, there is always satellite view. And satellite view is very interesting for a bunch of reasons. It can show you the terrain, of course. So looking at this small road that I'm thinking about following, the good paved road, I can see that it goes through kind of a valley here. And I can get a sense of whether it would be a scenic ride or not. This is where I have to join up with the main highway. And yeah, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that road at all. But even though I couldn't see that small road on Street View, you can zoom in on it on satellite view, and then you start to see some very interesting detail. And you can't really see what kind of road it is, but there it is there, zooming in on that road. And this is as close as we can get in terms of seeing a picture. But to me, it looks like a dirt road, like a countryside farming road. And here it looks like you could ride along it. And again, as I said, I went all the way along this entire road looking for trouble spots to try to decide whether I can follow this or not. And I eventually decided I'm not going to risk it. Yesterday, I was actually out in the countryside, and I did come across a country road that I rode down. It was a dirt road, and it was flooded. We've had so much rain recently. So this looks like it was taken in the dry season, but it's quite likely that sections of this small road are completely washed out and muddy. And if I had a major dirt bike and adventure gear and lots of time, you could attempt this road and it would be quite an adventure. But on my scooter, after zooming in and following this road, I decided, I think, that it's too challenging. But one thing I wanted to point out is that with the default view, at a certain level, of course, as I said, it just disappears entirely. But on satellite view, you can guess where the road is going to go. You can actually see a picture of the road on satellite view. But more than that, you can judge the terrain. And if you're a road builder, clearly you're going to build your road down this valley. This is where all the houses would be, because these are the mountains on both sides. So you can guess where the road is going to go. So the road is probably going to follow this valley all the way down to the point at the end there. And then we're in serious mountains, and you can guess that the road would go over these mountains, come down into this valley, and follow this valley as far as it can go. And I did follow the road all the way, and then it kind of dead ends down here because we're entering into national parks and things like that. And then looking at satellite view, I deduced that the road would hit this point. There's a cluster of communities down here, but then to continue, it has to turn back north, and the road goes up this valley and then through here and then back to the plains, and then it eventually joins with all the other roads again that I was looking at earlier. So as you can see from satellite view, I could actually deduce that this road would go down this valley, pop over to this valley, go down to here, then work back up north, and then over, and then down to Gampeng Phet. Around here, actually. It has to go up and then around through this point, and then eventually, yeah, through this gap here between this hill or mountain and this mountain chain, and then into Gampeng Phet. So yeah, satellite view can be very useful. So as attractive as this small road would be, a lot of fun to try to follow this through all of these river valleys. I don't think I'm going to do it. I was up here recently. I went into a village right below the Hill Tribes market, and the road got extremely steep and extremely rough very quickly. So that also gave me an indication of just how rough these roads might be. So I don't think I will be doing this small dirt road route today. What I will be doing is coming out of Gampeng Phet. I have to cross this bridge and follow along here until I get to this intersection with 1116, turn off onto this small road, and then I'll follow it and slowly work my way to the north. And the other technique I use, the last thing that I wanted to mention, is that, of course, you can drop pins wherever you like. And I did that for this route. Let's go back to the default view just for a second so it's a little bit more clear. So there's Gampeng Phet, and this is my road. But I was wondering whether I have to go all the way back to the main highway or not. Maybe I can get to this point and then cut straight across, and that might be add some spice to the day. So I did some research, and I think that is possible. And what I do is I put in a lot of waypoints just to kind of give me a rough outline of the route that I want to follow. If you go down here to the bottom, you can see a button called Saved. Click on that, scroll down, and then you can see all of your lists. I guess mine are set to private. I didn't do that on purpose. I think by default, they're all just private. So I have all of my own places marked on all these different maps. You create on these lists. You create them yourself. So I have a Tax City list, places I wanted to visit there, a Highway 12 list, a Sukhothai list, Umpang, and then quite a large one for Mae Sot. Yeah, 64 places, on and on. And I created a list for Gampeng Phet, and I currently have 33 places on it. And if you click on these three dots over here, you get a bunch of options. And one of them is to show or hide on your map. So right now, all the marks are hidden. But if I go to Gampeng Phet list, I click show on your map. Now if we go back to my map, so there are all of my marks that I use to plan this route. So here are the ones that I was thinking about doing on the really small rough road, having to come all the way down to here, and then back up to the north, back to here. And I've rejected that route, but here is the route that I've settled on with all of my little waypoints. So here's where I turn at this intersection, and then I can kind of see the route that I have to follow. And here is where the road goes back to the main highway and then out again, but I don't have to do that. I figured out I can follow this path. So if you zoom in until you see the roads, and there they are there. So at this point, I can turn off the main road, go up to here, turn left, and follow this small road. And then I rejoin it there without having to go all the way back to the main highway. And then at this intersection, turn left, and eventually get all the way to there. And I can't remember if this small road had street view or not. I don't think it did. Oh, it did. Look at that. Okay. So let's take a look at the road. So it is a dirt road, but I think just having a little bit of dirt road in the route today will make it a little bit more interesting. And if I start and it seems to be too rough, I can always turn around and go back. And with my route marked that I'm going to follow, let's switch over to a satellite view and see what it looks like. So that's kind of interesting, leaving from Gamphang Phet over the Ping River, and then it loops around whatever this is, cuts in between this mountain and the national park, and then heads up through this valley, kind of along the edges of this mountain range. And I'd still love to go through here. This looks like a beautiful path to follow, but I think I would need a different vehicle to do that. And quite often, if I do notice on satellite view something like this, then I'll zoom in further to see if there's another road that goes around the edges, that it might be just a fun detour. Or as you can see, as you zoom in, a temple has popped up, and there's probably a road, right there, leading up to that temple. Or it could turn into a trail, you just never know. But there, we kind of have that mountain centered, and if we switch to default view, yeah, you don't really see anything, do you? You get a hint that there's something there, but again, I don't see any good roads around it. And if you zoom, even if you zoom in, yeah, you're not seeing any roads at all. So there's not much chance of doing a detour around that. Let's take a look at the terrain. So here, yeah, now you get a sense of what it looks like, the bare bones of that mountain range or that hill range. All right, so that is it. Satellite view of my route and the default view of the route that I'll be following. I'm not sure how much video I'm going to take today of the actual ride. I'll probably document this ride on video since I talked about it up until this point, and then maybe I'll stop taking video right here because the rest of it will just be me zooming along the highway as fast as I can to get to Mae Sot.